Okay, today we're going to talk about two more principles of design, and that would be emphasis and economy. Emphasis is the stressing of a particular area or characteristic rather than presenting a maze of details of equal importance. And one way of achieving that emphasis is to make one area or quality dominant. It becomes the most important visually. And that area that our eye is drawn to, it might be the largest, the brightest, the darkest, the most complex, or some other reason that this area stands out. This is Namgabo's linear construction. And you can see in the middle here this sort of ovoid shape, and it's the void. There's nothing in there, which is sort of ironic that that would become the dominant part, the part with nothing in it. But compared, the simplicity of this, the darkness, the fact that it's in the center here next to all of this, these are all lines of I assume it's like fishing line or something like that. But anyway, this web of lines here, and all of that incredible detail that we find this so sort of refreshing and becomes our focal point. The other thing about this, that this is a walk around, a full in the round piece. And because it's transparent, you can see this center, this focal point from almost every view. Possibly on the end here, it might get a little bit muddled and be something else. But pretty much when you walk around, this is the thing that draws the eye. And sometimes when you are looking at, they can be pieces, full round pieces, or in this case, this is an installation by an artist named Sue Sunny Park. And you're going to have multiple focal points, right? Because every step you take, the whole thing is going to be changing. Now, that would be true if it was also a large sculpture that you just walked around. Maybe from the backside, there would also be something that would really catch your eye, a focal point, rather than just having all the interest in the front. And this is, of course, a real problem when you're dealing with portraits or humans, because we all want to see the face. The backside becomes kind of not that interesting, but, that's why it's a challenge for artists, and they're up to the task. Here's another picture of this. A pretty amazing thing, just with light and transparency and reflective surfaces. You feel like you were in the center of the Milky Way or something, I would think. And then there are other walk-through pieces, like a garden. In this case, this is supposed to be some form of a Zen garden. And oftentimes there will be a sculpture, a sundial, a fountain, whatever it may be, that is the focal point when you go into that garden. You may walk around, but every time you turn a little bit, you will see this thing that is drawing your attention. And sometimes it's just a beautiful plant. In this case, this big spray of pink, misty foliage. Okay, another form of emphasis is by directing all of the elements towards an intended goal. And with most Christian churches, buildings often, you are meant to be pulled up. Your spirit's looking up skyward. That's the direction they want you to be looking. And so in this case, this is Gaudi's the Sagrada Familia, again in Barcelona. It's just such a great piece. The accent here is on the vertical, right? They want you to be walking up and being just awestruck by the incredible verticality of this thing, which is so much more. I mean, this is, you can see this is still in construction, and this is sort of a new part, but that you are just completely drawn up with this incredibly vertical, tall structure with these spires that taper and sort of take you off into infinity. And look at all the negative spaces in here, this kind of perforating of that surface, which makes it look lighter. And there again, sort of a message for your spirits. Another way of creating emphasis is by having the elements of design create a visual economy. You're stripping away all the non-essentials to leave just the essence of your visual idea. In this case, this is a British potter by the name of Hans Koper. And he wanted you to look at his form, which is kind of an interesting vase form, but just this beautiful round orb, this incredibly kind of this ironic flat disc up on top here. And to emphasize the depth of this, you've got this black in here that just hints, it's kind of runs into this small area of texture just at the shoulder of the piece. He could have had this texture all over the place and beautiful glazes and this and that, but he really wanted you to concentrate on the form. So he gave you little hints of where your eye might be looking and then stripped the rest away. So visual economy, take away all the distracting stuff and let's just look at that form. And then there was a period, I think it was the 70s, probably started in the 60s, but anyway, minimalism, which I'm going to leave to smarter people to explain. But it was interesting, and artists were getting a little tired of all the drama and etc. of contemporary art. I mean, we're coming right out of abstract expressionism. Okay, sorry for the interruption. So the minimalists. So it was kind of a backlash against all the abstract expressionism and, all about, how things, the emotions and feelings of things. And they sort of stripped everything away, economized to the nth degree. And it was more about height and depth and weight and materials, usually very industrial materials, like this is felt, or they use plywood and things like that. It was an interesting escape. I read somewhere that Robert Morris, who's the artist here, that these have something to do with the weight of skin, but I don't know, take an art history class. All righty, let's get going here. Okay, here's another one. This is by Judy Chicago. Something about pickets. So you get the idea. Lots of units and repeated, very simple forms, etc. Okay, so let's look at this. This is economizing, taking away, stripping down a lot of the geography of the face, if you will, just taking it down to abstracting it. I mean, I think there's a real connection between abstraction and economy. But in this case, you're taking it down to just a few planes. And the way the light catches this in this photo, just look at this beautiful arc here. This is probably the most eye-catching in a way with the texture. But there again, when we come to human faces, we're always checking out each other's faces, right? You go right to the eyes to see who the heck this person is, because we all feel like we can look into someone's eyes and tell what they're like. Anyway, it's certainly this whole thing, not just a female head form, but it looks like someone at rest. The name of this piece is Sleeping Muse. So about sleep. Okay, this is another kind of abstract, simplified piece. Whoops. Oh my goodness. Okay, here's another piece, very stripped down, two human figures, one's looking at the other. I always think of this being about the focal point of this, or the emphasis of this is the relationship, the closeness, kind of. It's more of a sentiment than anything, right? Just the way that those bodies are nestled together. Man, am I having a hard time today or what? Oh my goodness. Here's another piece, an abstract piece that there's a lot going on here. You can see the way the artist kind of smeared the plaster over the armature, but he's just left it so you can see really the making of the piece, how a very expressive way of just applying the plaster. But all the attention there again, we all love our own faces, we humans. This is where all the detail is. We've got these lines that are directing us up to those eyes again. That's where all the detail is. That's where the emphasis is, right? That's where there's the part that is contrasting. So this is kind of plain down here, and all the scribbly stuff is up here on the face, all pointing into those eyes. Another little cute thing they do here. Here's this arc down here, and this arc up here on the forehead. So there's this sort of implied circle here that also circles us, hones us into that face. Stripping away a lot of detail in the face and whatever we are reading in this guy's eyes. Oh, here's another face, and we're drawn immediately to that eyeball, right? I mean, our eyeballs are almost like targets, right? With a little black dot in the center. I mean, right there, that's where we're going. So that's probably the first place we go. And all these forms, these rays here are going into the face, and we've got that eyeball there. But there's kind of a dialogue. You kind of are fighting to go back and forth here a little bit to begin with. And then we sort of stretch out. We've got these gold colored elements here that everything kind of making our eyes swirl around. And that is what's fun about a lot of abstract work that is just, it's more formal, it's more compositional, that you can play with the way that you lead your viewer through the piece. It's kind of fun. It's a game. Oh my goodness, why will you not work? Here we go. Okay, another Nancy Graves piece. I don't really know, I don't remember what the name of this one is, but it sort of looks like a tree to me in a way, but the top part, those transparent and translucent screens, overlapping screens, they almost look like clouds, or they could be foliage. I mean, is this a kite form up here in the sky? I'm not really sure, but I find it delightful to look at. But so what's the dominant part here? You know, ask yourself, where does your eye go? Well, usually we go again there for areas of contrast. In that first Nongabo piece, it was the simple area, the void. In this case, we've got all this more of these overlapping busy lines, but this red really stands out, and that's where my eye is immediately taken up to. Also because you've got this swooping elements down here, these swooping lines that are pointing up to that way. So you've got this red here, and then you want to pop over to the red there. I mean, it's interesting the way the artist can take your attention and eyesight on a little adventure. And then the other weird thing is this, you know, this strange geometric form up here, right? That everything else is kind of organic, but you've got this strange thing that looks like it's out of your geometry book or something. And then these other little secondary lines are kind of leading you around a little dance around this whole piece. Very fun. Anyway, there again, that's why abstract work can be so fun, that you can play with how you make your viewer look. Here's another abstract piece, you know, and if you look at it, what to you is the focal point and why? Okay, for me, you know, you've got all these big I-beams, these big steel beams that are nestled into the ground, I mean, like plunged into the ground. And the thing that's binding them all together are these contrasting O shapes here, kind of hook it all in. And so here's another thing. So what's the dominant thing about this? Well, of course, we want to go to those eyes. This is kind of an amazing portrait. It's called White Night. Very realistic looking face. But then this artist put this red film of a triangle over the eyes and into the nose, and down into the lips here too. So, I mean, if you weren't immediately attracted to the eyes in the first place, which look like they're blue on this completely white porcelain piece, but then they put this red flag here that said, "Look at me, look at me." You've got this Hollywood hair up here with lots of tresses and deep cut shadows and stuff like that, that also draw your attention, that come swooping down, that point you into the eye here. You've got these circular elements ringing around the neck, you know, everything kind of making you want to focus on that face, even this little armor sort of thing. Oh, my poor dog. Anyway, and then there's this is to me always sort of this funny irony. Then there's this other little tiny face, which of course we want to look at. It's the only other tiny little detail that next to all these broad areas of not much interest in here. But then you have that little thing. It's kind of funny, the back and forth here. And the last thing here, let's see, economy. I mean, you know, this artist, Richard Serra, does a lot of these incredibly huge, incredibly heavy, many multi-tonned structures that that you're, as a viewer, you're often made to enter or have to walk around or are impeded by. And he has some. I think the title of this is something like A Matter of Time. Is it the immensity of time? Is it the time it takes you to walk around? Is it the time that it takes to stretch and pound this metal into these amazing arcs? I mean, think of the mastery that goes into that. But if you go inside there, you can see that the height of it, is over twice as tall as the human, and kind of tilted in. I would get a very oppressive, maybe insignificant feeling inside of this thing. Also slightly menacing the way it's curving in. And I mean, just for history's sake, one of these things one time did fall on somebody when they were installing it and killed the installer. They're huge. But what an experience. I think he has said about these, Richard Serra, that he is creating a place. Sorry about all the gagging in the background. My dog seems to have eaten something. So, anywho, now we're going to take a little bit of a side trip here. So, one of you students sent a picture of a war memorial, which has always been sort of a curiosity for me. Just the way that wars and the people in the wars are depicted. So I thought we'd zoom off on that with the whole idea of economy. I think for one of the things is about economy. So here we have a very detailed, the full Monty. We've got a horse with all the mane and the tail, and there's George Thomas up there, some kind of a Civil War general. He looks like he's sort of at rest. The hand, he's holding his hat. The horse is still very alert, but this maybe is a man who feels tired but satisfied, is maybe going home because he was a Union general and they won the war and all of that's good. But there he is, and that's about the war there, right? I mean, the Union won. And then we flip to another kind of contrasting sort of theme, which often goes with the dead and war memorials. And this is a war memorial to, I think, World War I, the people that didn't come back who lived in Washington, D.C. Of course, it's not a state, so, they don't have an option for honoring the way that other states do. So this is this very somber, sober, and beautiful building that is a contemplative space for you to go and feel. There again, probably when you're inside here, just, your eyes are looking up into the heavens, where you might remember these people who gave their lives and didn't come back. And here's a really tiny picture. There again, here's another sort of mausoleum looking piece. This is on the wall, on the mall, the Capitol Mall in Washington, D.C., where all the monuments and Smithsonian and the buildings are. And so this is to World War II. And around this huge area, it's several acres, there's each of these little monoliths with wreaths hooked onto them. And so there's at least 50 of them, because there's one for every state, and probably Puerto Rico and Guam and, American Samoa, et cetera, et cetera. So a place, so we are, it kind of looks like a cemetery in a way, where we're remembering the fallen. And there again, a contemplative space. Oh my goodness, why is this not going? Here's another view of that World War II War Memorial, and you can see there's a fountain in the middle, a place to go and with your thoughts and think about what this war was about. And then here's another style. This is the Marines at Iwo Jima planting the flag after they had declared victory on this island. And you're looking here, what's the focal point? Well, this flag, only because of its colors and it's waving. These guys are still, although look at the implied movement here of them cramming this thing into the ground and really putting all their weight into it. It's such an effort. It talks about, reminds you of what a team effort a military unit would be, and all of their legs in tension. And look at the rhythm of this thing. Leg and leg and leg and leg and arms and arms and arms. And the hats or the helmets here. A really iconic piece. I mean, most Americans would recognize this piece. But it's all about that teamwork, that working together for their success. And here's another piece. This is a memorial to the Vietnam War. Not one of our high points particularly. You look at the eyes of these soldiers. I mean, none of them, they're tired. These two guys, their eyes are downcast. This one is sort of, I think if you look where the pupils are, he's kind of looking right at you. It's kind of a questioning, about that war. You can interpret it any way you want, but, they look tired. This is another really interesting piece. This is a memorial to the Korean War, which to this day I don't think is a totally resolved war. No one has declared victory or defeat or whatever. So you've got a whole platoon of these guys trudging through this kind of wicked terrain. They've got their ponchos on. You get a sense of how miserable the weather might have been. They're kind of hunkered down with the weight of their backpacks and their weapons, and there again, the weather, the emotions. It's kind of neat because then in the back, or maybe distracting, I'm not sure. It could almost be a whole other memorial, but you've got another group of soldiers, this image of soldiers on this reflective wall that I believe also has the names of people that died in that conflict, but they're kind of scattered around. I mean, soldiers not seen in a big organized way, but kind of as just people doing their thing here, at ease. So we go from these sort of very pompous, staid, kind of celebrating generals who are often seen as the focal point of a lot of the earlier wars. They're the ones that were really regaled, and not the soldiers. You've seen how it kind of moves over from remembering the fallen, even though there may have been, great victories for those generals, but they really aren't the focal point here like these older ones. This is a general from the Revolutionary War. So from that kind of, bravado and, oh, we're strong and great. And then, this is Arlington Cemetery, which isn't meant to be seen as a sculpture, although there are sculptures around here. But you see something like this, which is sort of almost a minimalistic sculpture in a sense. It's got these rows and rows, and you know how you walk through a vineyard or an orchard and you get how the optics of a piece change as you walk through or drive by. And you get the awesome power of what wars really, maybe the real message is that all of these once were lives and young men in their prime, maybe, and families and friends, and that are all, attached to each one of these. I mean, maybe this is the more powerful memorial to war. And lastly, it brings me to maybe I find the most moving of these war memorials. And it's this memorial to the Vietnam War by Maya Lin. And you walk up to this, you can enter the mall here. Here you can see the Washington Monument down there. And you can't really see anything until you get the edge here, and you see this gash into the earth that was cut out. So you have to walk around, and it's really quite huge. I should have the dimensions of it, but I don't. But it's quite huge. I mean, it's a walk. And you start on one of these ends down these walkways, and you're just going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the earth, like a burial almost. And here there are listed rows and rows and never-ending rows of all the names of the young men that went to this war and didn't come back. And people leave, here's some flags and letters and books and whatever, flowers and things that are cleaned away every day, but they just never stop. And people come to, put their hand on their friend's or family member's name or take a rubbing of it. It's such a moving experience. I had no idea. I mean, I was in tears. When you think about, silly, immature young men, when I was in high school being conscripted to go fight these battles, and many of them did not come back. It was like this big gash in the earth. It was sort of a huge scar. And anyway, this is an incredibly moving piece that you guys should go see. And to me, says so much more about war and what it's really about. So you make up your own minds, but I think it's always very interesting to have these incredibly detailed, realistic representational sculptures of the glory of war, of generals and medals and, grand horses and this and that. And yet maybe something that is so stripped down, like what is this war really about? And that is about the soldiers and the lives. So I don't know, I just always find it really interesting, the way that memorials give their message. Do I have anything else here? Oh, one last picture here you can see, and then leave it to it is a 3D thing, this bouquet of roses here, left by one of those, and you get a sense that yes, this is it looks so impersonal in a way, and yet how personal it is for the person that makes the pilgrimage to leave those there. So just interesting way to look at memorials. economy, and emphasis.